Hello everyone, my name is Havian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Code Vein. The videos that I made recently about Code Vein were focused more on showing you some of the gameplay, but this time I'll be going into a bit more detail about how some of the systems in the game work, and things that I found about how the progression works in this game. Just remember that I'm playing an early build of the game, so some of the things that you can see still may change before release. From what I've seen, you've got a lot of flexibility in the way that you build your character in Code Vein, and you're not really locked into any of the choices that you make. You can experiment and adjust your build whenever you feel like it, as long as you've unlocked the equipment and skills that you want to use. So it seems like there's a lot of freedom for people to find a way to play that works for them. Now, to start with the basics, pressing square does a weak attack that usually consumes a small amount of stamina compared to some of the other attacks. Doing things like attacking, evading, or blocking will consume stamina, and when this runs out you can't really perform any of those actions anymore, unless you wait for the stamina to recover. Pressing square and R1 will do the special attack for that specific weapon, and pressing square behind an enemy will trigger a back attack. Back attacks do a lot of damage, but they won't actually work on every enemy type. Some enemies will hit you with a surprise attack if you get too close to them from behind. But if you do manage to pull off a successful back attack, you'll automatically drain Ichor from the enemy. Ichor is the resource that is used when casting gifts in Code Vein. You can restore Ichor when you attack an enemy, block attacks, or when you drain an enemy. At first, depending on your blood code, your Ichor will be capped up to a certain point, but performing drains actually does increase this cap. Pressing triangle will do a strong attack that's usually slower than a weak attack and consumes a bit more stamina, but it can deal more damage. And then holding down triangle will do a charged heavy attack. And if your character is in the focus state, pressing triangle while holding down R1 will launch an enemy into the air, and then you'll perform a drain directly after. At the bottom left of your screen there is a bar that will start to increase if you take damage or if you dodge attacks with perfect timing. When this gauge is full, you will go into focus, and that will make you harder to stagger, and you'll have an easier time staggering enemies. And it's not just you that can go into focus, your AI partner will be able to enter the focus state as well, but so can the enemies. When you are out of combat, your focus will start to slowly fade, and even if you lose all of your health while you are focused, you'll still stay in the focus state if your partner manages to heal you quick enough. Without going into too much story details, in Code Vein, your character won't die unless your heart is destroyed. When you lose all your health, your character starts to fade away unless your partner manages to save you. If your partner can't get to you in time, your body will recover at nearby Mistle, which is basically the checkpoints in Code Vein. Pressing circle will evade enemy attacks, and depending on your mobility, the kind of evade you use will change. Mobility is affected by your total weight, and there's different dodge speeds. These speeds are quick, normal, or slow, and the speed bracket you're in will change your dodge animation. And along with evading, you can block attacks if you have enough stamina if you push L1. You still take damage while blocking, but depending on the weapon, that damage can be drastically reduced, and you can drain Ichor from an enemy with each hit that is blocked. Pressing R1 while moving will increase your movement speed, allowing you to dash, but this does drain your stamina if you keep holding it down for too long. Holding down X will use your Blood Veil's drain attack, and this will function differently depending on the Blood Veil that you're using. But for the most part, the animation is slightly longer than the other attack, so it's a good idea to use it when you have a good opportunity to do so. But you will drain Ichor and deal damage to enemies if you manage to pull it off. But there is a safer and a faster way to do a drain attack, and that is if you press R1 and X in the middle of one of your combos. Pushing L2 with the right timing will parry attacks from enemies. And while playing, it did feel like the speed of my parry changed depending on the Blood Veil I was using. It's something that I'll probably need to play the game a bit more before I can confirm for sure, but it did feel like there was a bit of a difference between the Blood Veils and the parry speed. And for those of you that thought the game showed the drain animation a bit too much, I can confirm that it's been toned down a lot in the build that I played, and you can disable it completely in the options. And then finally, holding down R2 and pressing the directional buttons or the face buttons on your pad will activate gifts. And gifts are basically the magic or the abilities in the world of Code Vein. You can slot up to 8 active gifts that are usually buffs or attacks, and 4 passive gifts that enhance your character as long as they're equipped. Gifts can be learnt and used on a specific blood code at first, but fulfilling certain requirements for a gift will let you master it. Once you master a gift, you'll be able to use it on another blood code as long as you meet the stat requirements to equip it. Gifts can either be light based or dark based, and they have different damage types that can be used to exploit certain enemy weaknesses. And there's also another type of gift that you can use as long as you're with a partner, the Communal Gift. These gifts tend to be powerful and situational, but they come with a heavy ichor cost. Mia's Communal Gift was Blood Awakening, which reduced ichor cost and enhanced gifts, but it did lower your attack power. Yakumo has Lupinus Vita, which reduced the guard stamina consumption and dodge speed, but increased attack. And Louis had Reckless Abandon, which increases attack, decreases damage reduction, and alters your dodges. Up until this point, you've probably heard me mention blood codes quite a few times now. For those of you that are wondering what blood codes are, they are pretty much the classes in Code Vein, and they give your character more of a specific playstyle. It might not be like this in the full version of the game, but when changing blood codes, a set of gifts were automatically allocated to my character. I don't think all the skills that were slotted were from those particular blood codes, and I think it was probably just for testing purposes, but at least it gives us a vague idea of how they expect people to play those classes. Depending on the blood code you use, your stats will also change, and that will affect the kinds of gifts and equipment that you can use. So here's a quick overview of what the stats in this game currently do. Strength affects your physical attack and health. Dexterity affects your physical attack and drain rating. Mind affects your stamina, drain speed and light gifts. Willpower affects your elemental resistance and dark gifts. Vitality affects your health and physical damage reduction. And Fortitude affects your stamina and elemental resistance. But it's not just your blood codes that are influenced by these stats. Your weapons and your blood veils will scale from these stats as well. But first I'll go over the blood codes that I tried in this build of the game to give you a better idea of how they function. The first blood code was the Fighter. Fighters excel at delivering single powerful attacks with heavy weapons, and from what I could see they could use a wide variety of weapons, but not ones that have high dexterity or magical related stat requirements. Fighters start with a cap of 10 ichor, but if you drain enough they can reach a cap of 30. The gifts that fighters started with when I played were Sonic Arrow, which fires a projectile at an enemy, and is used more for pulling enemies away from a group. They also had a gift called Restorative Offering, which sacrificed some of your health to heal your allies. They had the Flashing Fang buff, which increased the power of your next attack, and they had Adrenaline, which temporarily increased your attack power. They also had Impact Wave, which added a shockwave effect to your striking attacks that dealt additional damage every time it hit. They also had a gift called Foul Blood Barrier, which put up a single-use barrier around you and your partner that greatly reduced the damage you'll take. And they had Frost Weapon, which temporarily added ice damage to your current weapon. And there were also 4 different passive gifts that were slotted into the fighter. There was one called Health Boost, which increased your maximum health. There was Charge Accelerator, which increased the speed of your charged actions. There was Balance Up, which increased your balance. And there was Resilient Focus, which increased the focus gained by taking damage. The next blood code I used was the Assassin, which according to the game, excel at delivering combination attacks and performing quick evasions. They specialize in melee combat and use gifts that are great for surprise attacks. And at first I didn't really know what to do with Assassin, because in this build the weapon selection was very similar to the fighter. But based on the gifts and the stats that they focus on, it's probably going to be a blood code that works well for people that prefer more of an evasive and parry focused playstyle. But that's something I'll probably try again when they release a new build of this game for testing. Assassins start with 16 ichor and can reach a cap of 44. And here's the gifts that they had. Just like the fighter, they could use Sonic Arrow for pulling enemies. They could also use Restorative Offering for healing your allies. But the first different ability was called Fire Lily, which threw a blade that stuck into enemies and then detonated. They also had Blade Dance, which temporarily increased your attack each time you damaged an enemy with your weapon. Which sounds like it would be a very powerful buff to use if you have a very fast hitting weapon. They also had Frost Weapon, which temporarily added ice damage to your weapon. They had a gift called Hasten, which temporarily enhanced your dodges. And they had Overdrive, which temporarily increased the attack for both you and your partner, but the effect ended when you took damage. The passive gifts that they had were Stamina Boost, which increased your maximum stamina. They had Sharpened Fangs, which increased the damage done by special drains performed after a parry or a back attack. They had Focus Stamina Usage, which reduced the stamina spent while you were in focus. And they had Focus Carnage, which reduced the rate that your focus gauge was consumed by attacks when you were in focus. And the last blood code that I tested out, which I'm pretty sure you've seen the video for, is the Caster. The caster that I used didn't really have a wide selection of weapons, but it did make up for it with its powerful attack type gifts that could be used from a distance. Unlike the other blood codes, the caster starts with a large amount of ichor. They start with 30 and they can reach a cap of 60. This means that they can rely on their gifts a bit more than the other blood codes. Just like with the fighter and the assassin, I could use sonic arrow to pull enemies away from groups, I could use restorative offering to heal my allies, and I could use freezing roar to fire a projectile of ice at an enemy. Aurora Flash created a freezing blade that sweeps through enemies in an arc in front of you. Guard of Honor summons blades that fly towards the target one by one. Hunting Feast temporarily increased the drain rating of weapon attacks. And Antibody Generation temporarily increased resistance to all debuffs. And the passive gifts that I had in the caster were Weapon Drain rating up, which increased the drain rating of weapon attacks. Dark Impulse increased the effects of dark gifts while focused. Augmented Regeneration increased the amount of times regeneration could be used, which is the healing skill that you can use on yourself. And increased gift speed increased the speed of gifts. So overall, the caster had a lot of offensive gifts and a lot of ways to enhance their ichor regeneration. But along with the blood codes that I was able to try, there have been a few others that have been spotted in previous builds of the game or as pre-order bonuses. The Revenant blood code was one that was spotted in some earlier builds of the game. Depending on which build it was used, it tended to have different stats and gifts available. This blood code may have been one that was just purely there for demonstration purposes before the full blood code system was actually completed, but I'm not actually sure if this is going to be a blood code that will make it into the final game, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. And the other blood code was the Harbinger, which does seem to be a blood code that can be obtained through pre-orders for the game. But it's said to be a blood code that offers special characteristics to its user. It could be the same blood code that Japan gets for their pre-orders, which comes with the Death Parade Bomb gift, that apparently deals heavy damage to enemies in an area but leaves the user weakened. I'm sure there's going to be many more blood codes and gifts in the full game, but at least this will give you a basic idea of how blood codes work in Code Vein. Another important part of building your character is the equipment that you use. Weapons come in different categories, and even if you use two weapons that are part of the same category, they can have totally different movesets, damage types, and special attacks. In this build of the game, I had access to one-handed swords, two-handed swords, spears, hammers, and bayonets. And from what I saw, all equipment had their own stat requirements. If you tried to use equipment that you didn't meet the stat requirement for, then damage and mobility were severely nerfed. Most of the weapons that I tried were focused on strength and dexterity, but the bayonet was the only one that leaned more towards dexterity, willpower, and mind, which made it more of a good choice for magic focused characters. In the full game, you will be able to upgrade and transform your weapons with materials that you find in the world and by using haze, which can increase the power of a weapon and give them additional special properties. And if you're wondering what haze is, it's the main currency of the game. It's used for leveling up, upgrading equipment, or when unlocking abilities. When you kill enemies or use certain items, you can obtain haze, but if you die, you will drop that haze on the ground and you'll need to run back to where you died to reclaim it without dying a second time. If you end up dying a second time, then you'll end up losing it. But here are some of the stats that you can find on weapons and how they'll affect your character. Required stats will show you which stats are required to use the weapon. Some weapons will only need one stat, but there are some weapons that will require multiple stats. Stat scaling shows the stats that the weapon scales from, and weight will affect the overall mobility of your character. The attack section goes over the offensive information about the weapon, and the physical damage types that can be on a weapon are slash, crush, and pierce, and a weapon can have more than one damage type. Physical damage will show the total damage of a weapon, which is usually the base damage and the scaling damage combined into one number. And the non-physical damage types will show the non-physical damage that can be on a weapon, which are blood, fire, ice, and lightning. And the drain rating will show how much ichor can be obtained from attacking an enemy. The defense section will show the information about blocking with the weapon. You'll be able to see your blocking defense against the different damage types. Stamina reduction will show you how much stamina is used while successfully blocking an attack. And the drain rating will show you how much ichor can be obtained while defending. And yes, that does mean you can gain ichor by blocking attacks as well. The stats effect section will show your weapon's ability to inflict debuffs on an enemy. The higher the number, then the higher the chance you'll have to inflict that debuff. And here are the different debuffs that you can inflict. Venom will slowly drain the enemy's health. Stun will temporarily leave them unable to act. Inhibit will prevent them using gifts, and Slow will reduce all their movement, including attacking and dodging. The other bit of equipment that you can use is the Blood Veil. This functions as the armor in Code Vein, but along with having defensive stats, they can actually be used to attack enemies. Just like the weapons, Blood Veils have their own required stats, stat scaling and weight, but they also have a drain attack. Drain attack affects the amount of damage inflicted while draining an enemy, and for the most part, the Blood Veils follow the same damage types as weapons. The damage types that can affect Blood Veils are Slash, Crush, Pierce, Blood, Fire, Ice and Lightning. And just like weapons, they have a drain rating to show how much Ichor can be drained while attacking with it. Blood Veils also have an influence on the damage of gifts. Each Blood Veil has a light based gift and a dark based gift rating that will be weaker or stronger depending on the type of veil that you're using. The other important stats on a Blood Veil are the damage reduction stats and the resistance stats. The damage reduction percent shows the amount of damage reduced, and these are broken down into the Slash, Crush, Pierce, Blood, Fire, Ice and Lightning damage types. And the balance section will show your stagger resistance. In Code Vein, when you take damage, your character will briefly stagger, leaving them vulnerable. Having a higher balance stat will reduce the effects of the stagger. The resistances section will show your ability to resist debuffs, and here are the different debuffs that you can get and the ways to counter them if you don't end up resisting them. Venom will slowly drain your health, but it is curable with items and gifts. Stun temporarily leave you unable to act, but it can be prevented if you use certain items and gifts before being stunned, or if you take a hit, it will break you out of it. Inhibit will prevent the use of gifts, but this can be prevented with items and gifts. Slow will reduce all movement, including attacking and dodging, but just like the other debuffs, it can be cured with items and gifts. And Leak will slowly drain your Ichor, but this can be cured with items and gifts as well. At the moment, there are 4 different types of Blood Veils that each have their own unique purpose. The Ogre type Blood Veil has the visual appearance of a claw when used. When attacking with this Blood Veil, you slide a short distance towards the target and you slash them to drain Ichor. Stat wise, this Blood Veil was more of an all-rounder and seemed like it would be a good choice for most situations. The Stinger type Blood Veil has the visual appearance of a scorpion tail when used. When attacking with this Blood Veil, a tail will appear that can pierce through multiple enemies at a distance and drain Ichor. The Stinger Veil that was available for me to try had high balance and a high drain rating, but it was the heaviest out of all of the Blood Veils, and it did take a while for the drain attack to fully charge. The Hound type Blood Veil takes on the visual appearance of wolf heads when used. When attacking, you'll need to be close to the enemy for the hit to connect, but if you are close enough, you'll be able to deal damage with both of the heads, dealing damage twice. The Hound type Blood Veil that I had access to had a high stun resist and high drain attack, but it did have the lowest gift damage. The Ivy type Blood Veil has the visual appearance of blades that travel underground when used. When attacking, you can freely move the Ivy underground, and once you've found a target, the blades will shoot up out of the ground and damage any of the nearby enemies. This Blood Veil had high elemental resistances and high gift damage, but it did have the lowest balance out of all of the veils that I tried. These are the only Blood Veil types that I managed to take a look at, and it does seem like these are the only ones that have been revealed so far, but there is a chance that there may be some more Blood Veil types in the full game once it releases. From what I've seen so far, there are a lot of ways to build your character in Code Vein. This can range from the way your character looks all the way down to the way they perform in combat. From what I've seen, you can change your build whenever you want to, so I'm hoping that this leads to interesting stories between players that discuss how they manage to get through a hard area or how they manage to take down a boss. One thing I didn't really get a chance to play around with as much as I wanted to was the leveling system. At first it did seem like you would level the blood codes individually, but from the looks of things it seems like gaining levels is fairly linear and straightforward. When you level up, you don't allocate any stats, you just pick the level you want based on the amount of haze that you have and you level up. Your health and stamina increases, and you may see an increase in some of your other stats based on the stat scaling of your equipment. But if I do have a chance to try the game again, I will play around with the leveling system a bit more. But this was a brief overview of what you can do to customize your playstyle in Code Vein. I'm sure there'll be a lot more to go over once more changes have been made and the full game releases in 2019. Yep, for those of you that don't know, the game has been pushed back so they can polish it a bit more and add more to it. But this is all the information about the game that I have for now. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to leave it a like. If you want to see more of my videos, then be sure to subscribe. And if you want to stay up to date with everything that I'm doing, then be sure to follow me over on Twitter. The links to everything are in the description. I'll be making some new videos very soon, but until I make those videos, I'll see you all later.